Well, as people file in, I can at least start our intro. So, welcome again. My name is Matt Schumann. I am a programming librarian here at Cary. Before we begin, please let me know if you're experiencing any technical issues and I can try to help you. If you have any questions tonight, please use the Q&A button or the raise hand function, and we'll address those questions at the end. And lastly, this program is made possible by the generous donors to the Cary Library Foundation. So with us this evening is Bill Gette. This is part two of our three-part series on New England wildflowers. Bill will be back on Thursday, July 25th for part 3. You can sign up on carylibrary.org on our calendar. About Bill, Bill is the former sanctuary director of the Joplin Flats Education Center in Newburyport and the past president of the Friends of Parker River National Wildlife Refuge. He's led expeditions across the world on all 7 continents. But today we'll be talking about local flowers. So now, please welcome Bill Gette.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate being here. I always enjoy working with you. And I always make the appeal when I talk to library groups is how important libraries are. In a lot of ways, I think libraries are our most important civic organization. And so if you have a way to support a library, either by volunteering or donating to the Friends group of the library, that's really good. The Friends groups do just so much work for them. Okay, so we're going through the second section of the wildflowers. Basically in Essex County, but primarily in eastern Massachusetts, I've photographed over 350 species of wildflowers. But in this presentation, I'll be talking about 70 of them. Those are the really very beautiful ones and ones that people are likely to see. And I'm really hoping that this introduction of these wildflowers are going to get you very much interested in wildflowers, and that you can then, be looking after wildflowers and basically chasing them down. I mean, looking for. I've always saying that I've been a bird watcher for a long time, and I always say it's really hard to be angry when you're chasing a chickadee, out in the field. Well, the same thing about wildflowers. I mean, you can really lose yourself in the first of all the beauty. Just looking at the middle image, notice that partridge berry. What an incredible blossom it has. We'll be seeing that again another time. So we'll be talking about the uses of some of these wildflowers, the key aids to identification, and relationships among the plants, among various different plants, but also relationships among the wildflowers and, say, ants and fungus and things of that nature. So what I'd like to do, and the references, the ones I use most when I'm in the field, is the Roger Tory Peterson text, which is, I have one that is like 40 years old. Now, the difficulty with the Peterson Field Guide is that some of the names have changed. But in terms of the illustrations, they are fabulous. Really good. But the one I use for the authoritative one is the one that's near the bottom on my list. It's the Wildflowers of New England by Ted Elliman and the New England Wildflower Society. That was published in 2016. That's an excellent guide. And then in terms of scientific names, that's a whole different thing. If you start looking at the scientific names and what do they mean, or what are the origin of these scientific names, it can be incredibly important, at least I think so. If you go online to Dave's Garden, and they will give you, go through a little bit, it will give you the origin of the scientific names, and some of them are just extraordinary. And I can lose myself for a half hour or 45 minutes just chasing down a scientific name and enjoying that portion of it too. These are my photographs, and for those who may not be particularly familiar with wildflowers, I'd like to start with the illustration of the plant and flower parts, just so you'll become familiar with it if you're going to start doing identification on your own. So many of the books are going to start with petals and what are petals and things of this nature, or what are sepals. And you really need to know those things in order to do a good job of identification. So just going through quickly, the axil, okay, is where the yellow arrows are. That's where basically the stem of the leaf means the major stem of the plant, or the trunk of the plant, if you wish. So in this case, on the right-hand side, you see the illustration of hairy Solomon's seal. Now, plants don't have hair. They have things that people call hair, but only mammals have hair. But in any case, notice that where the blossoms are coming from, the axils, okay? If you have full Solomon's seal, all those blossoms are way at the tip. So just one way to tell. So axils and petals, okay? So in the case of the silver weed, Pacific silverweed, but it grows in our salt marshes very commonly here. Notice it has, in this case, 5 yellow petals. In the case of, and those are radial petals because they sort of start in the middle and radiate out. And then you have the bilateral feathers, flowers of the foxglove. So different shapes. And then petioles, that's basically the stem of the leaf that goes into the stem of the major trunk of the plant. And on the left-hand side, you'll see that that's thin-leaved sunflower. It's a wild plant, wildflower. Notice it has a petiole. That's the image on the left-hand side. If you look at one of the beautiful, to me, really gorgeous plants, but it's a spring plant. They're long gone now. But sessile leaf bellwort. Sessile means it's stuck to. Okay, and it basically doesn't have a petiole. And so in plant descriptions, they'll be talking about petioles. Does it have one or not? Okay. Rhizomes, that's a way of reproducing. So that's a plant will send out these underground roots that go and pop up someplace else and grow into a new portion of that same plant, rhizomes. Now, sepals are the things that in most wildflowers are supporting underneath the blossom, the petals. So the red or purple trillium that you see on the left-hand side here, you have the 3 green sepals underneath the 3 red petals. The case of the common evening primrose, which is a really common plant. This is a daytime blossom, but notice in this case, instead of the sepals supporting the petals, they are reflected. That's the term, reflected. Okay, so that's a really key aid to identification if you're looking at evening primroses. Aesthetics. This is aesthetics. Think of this is a jack in the pulpit on the right-hand side and the skunk cabbage. The spadix is what's holding those tiny little blossoms within the plant. That's a spadix, and that's a spathe. The spathe, think of it, if we go back to the jack in the pulpit, on the photograph on the right-hand side, I've taken the spathe and I've just flipped it up so you could see the jack in the pulpit inside. But this is the covering, the spathe, and we'll see a wild calla later on in this presentation. And a stolon or runner is that this is think of it above ground root. It goes out, and where it meets bare soil, it will root and again make a new portion of the plant a distance away from the mother plant, if you want to look at it that way. A whorl, this is really quite common in a lot of the wildflowers. It's where the leaves are. Notice they all come out like a fan. They all are coming out from one spot on the stem. So whether it be the wild cucumber root, okay, on the left-hand side, or the starflower on the right-hand side. Okay. And there are a few of the reproductive parts, okay? These are the female reproductive parts, okay? A carpel includes the stigma, the style, and the ovary. So, okay, so those are the female reproductive parts, and here are the male reproductive parts. So you have the anther and the filament. So the filament is holding the anther up high where the pollen is easily accessible to any pollinating insect that may come through. They're not necessarily coming after the pollen, but they brush up against it as they come into the flower. Okay. And then flower types, it's important to know, this is referred to as a simple flower. Maybe not, doesn't look very simple, but they have many pistils, they have many stamens, and they have then layers of petals and sepals. This happens to be tall buttercup, okay? As opposed to this one, the composite flower. Okay, so that's one flower, but this is a huge array of flowers, okay? They have in the center, the yellow-orange part are disc flowers. They are complete flowers all by themselves. They're called a composite, or in this case, these are asters. And each of those can produce a seed. So you have the disc flowers in the middle and the ray flowers on the outside. And so the individual flowers. Now, the composite group, or asters, are the second largest group of flowering plants. The largest one are the orchids worldwide. Okay. So with that background, as we're going through just some of the plants. Now, how I've arranged this presentation, I've arranged the presentation in the order in which I saw them in blossom. Okay. So this one is the first photograph. This is in the beginning of June, but a lot of these plants are still in blossom right now. And so as we go through the presentation, you'll see that the earliest flower in blossom, where we are in the calendar year. So this is a trumpet honeysuckle. It's native to the southeastern part of the United States. So it's native to North America, but not to New England. But this is one that has been naturalized through the eastern part of our country. And these vines can be 12 to 15 feet long. And they are pollinated by butterflies, by moths, and by hummingbirds. So there's really a beautiful plant. And this is another one of those plants that takes advantage of other plants by growing over it like a vine. So it doesn't put a lot of energy in major stalk and growing upwards. It sort of just slumbers over other vegetation as it grows. This is cow parsnip. This is one of our largest wildflowers. It can be as much as 6 or 7 feet tall. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you can see by the seeds that you have. And if you look at the middle image at the bottom, that's an umbel. Okay, and those umbels are then supported. So think of it sort of looks like a fireworks that's gone off. Okay, so all the flowers are forming this umbel, and then those umbels can be 4 to 6 inches across. So we're talking a plant that is really very large and can produce lots and lots of seeds. On the right-hand image, bottom right-hand side, you might see that there's an ant that's walking through the blossoms, and they're pollinating this plant. This plant is eaten by both black and brown bears. It's a really common plant and grows to its greatest extent in places like Alaska. So this is just one I photographed in Newbury, Massachusetts, so right near where I live. The cinquefoils, there are just so many of them. They're so beautiful. Okay, and notice the genus name, Potentilla. Okay, this is a plant that had considered to have very important medicinal properties to it. So that Potentilla is talking about a powerful one. It refers to its medicinal properties that were used in this plant. So it reproduces by seeds, but it also reproduces by stolons or runners. This is a plant that you typically see in open areas, open fields, sometimes along forest edges. Okay. Lupin, this lupin is not native to this area, but it's native to the western part of the United States. I photographed this in Fort Hill area on Cape Cod. It's really a beautiful plant. Most of them have gone by in flower, but you should be seeing the seed heads at this time of year. Now, if you go to the beach, and I hope you have opportunities to go to the beach, this is one of these really amazing plants. This is beach pea, and they grow in the sand dunes, which are, usually the driest, hottest, really difficult place for plants to grow. But of course, it thrives in that area. A member of the pea family, and again, almost always in sand dunes. The seeds that you see in the upper right-hand corner image, they can last in seawater up to 5 years and still germinate. So this is a plant that, because of overwashes and storms and things, a lot of these seeds get out into the ocean. And so this is a plant that you can see in Europe, South America, Africa. And the seeds have a very, very thick and very, very hard outer shell. So the fact that they are in a sandy environment where they're blown around by the wind and everything actually is an important part in helping them to germinate, because they can't germinate when they have that original really thick outer shell. This is a beautiful plant. The first image I photographed was in June 2nd, but they're still in blossom way into August. If you go to places like the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge or Cape Cod or something like that, you will see them for sure. This is American false hellebore, okay, and it grows up about 3 feet tall. Notice the venation in the leaves on the right-hand image. Those are they're not parallel, but they're referred to as parallel veins in the leaves. So some are fern-like that spread out, and this is the parallel. Okay. Okay. Now, a lot of people have plants that looks very much like this in their garden and everything. This is blue flag. This is, again, common plant throughout the country, where there are wetlands, let's put it that way. I mean, you certainly see these things in Alaska. You see it in places like Newfoundland and all around here. This blue, really beautiful northern blue flag. Okay. And just notice the genus name here, iris. So it means rainbow colored. And Iris was the Greek goddess of the rainbow. And I just think I really enjoy the idea of when people were naming these plants, where they went to get their names. So a wetlands plant. This is cancer root. It doesn't cause cancer or anything like that. It's no problem. But this is a parasitic plant. It does not have any chlorophyll. So it is absolutely dependent on other plants. It basically absorbs nutrients from the roots of the plants that are right by it. No chlorophyll. It's entirely dependent on other plants for its and the roots of the root-like structures of the cancer root actually penetrates into the roots of the host plant and gets its nutrients that way. But I think this plant that stands up only about 6 or 7 inches. You really have to get down close to see it well. But I just think notice the hair-like structure. And again, they're not hair, but on the image on the right-hand side. I mean, it really is a beautiful plant. And there are so many plants that we have that are parasitic, that they cannot produce their own food. They're totally dependent on getting food from other plants. I just got back from the Connecticut Lakes region of northern New Hampshire, and we're seeing a lot of these eastern blue-eyed grass. Well, it's not a grass, okay? It's a member of, believe it or not, of the iris family. And so that only stands up, it depends on how much competition there is for the plants around it, but I would say 8 to 10 inches in height. And the blossom's maximum is about 1 inch across of the blossom. But I just think the detail of this blue, so you can see where it gets its name, blue-eyed grass. Well, certainly blue, and the stem is a simple stem, and it does look like a grass. Okay. Now, this for many farmers, it's yellow hawkweed. It's a non-native, so that's what the A after my A in parentheses after yellow hawkweed. Another name for them is king devil, because this is one of those things that they get into farmers' fields and everything, and it's a real problem for farmers. It's a prolific reproduction plant, and it can overrun a crop ground and things of that nature. Now, I love the idea of, again, these names, hawkweed. Where did the name hawkweed? What does this have to do with a hawk? Well, the greatest of in antiquities, one of the greatest naturalists was a Roman by the name of Pliny the Elder. Okay, there's also Pliny the Younger, But Pliny thought that he had seen hawks eating the flowers of this hawkweed, and he surmised that they were doing that in order to strengthen their eyesight. Okay, do hawks eat them? I don't never seen them. Do they strengthen their eyes? I sort of doubt it, but that's okay. But by the way, Pliny the Elder was killed in Herculaneum during the eruption of Vesuvius. And his son, Pliny the Younger, was across the bay and watched the eruption. He didn't know his father was dying, but he did indeed. Anyway, that's the origin of yellow hawkweed. Now, cow vetch is not native to North America. It was introduced. It was part of the reason it was introduced is because it grows very, very fast. And it was a plant that they could, where new roads were being constructed or things of that nature, they wanted something that would cover the area very, very quickly to hold the ground. That was one thing. The other thing is that the cow vetch, working with a bacterium, can fix nitrogen in the soil. So a couple reasons. So this is a plant that you'll see. This, I happen to photograph these in June 6th, but they're way in blossom still now. It's, when you look at it, it's really, I really encourage you to not just take a look at the mass of flowers, but take one of these and really look at the individual flowers. These are really beautiful. If you like orchids and think orchids are beautiful, you'll think this is pretty beautiful too. Okay. I think this is a common plant that most people see, that really notice this plant when it's at the right-hand side, when in late summer, June 20th is when I took the image in the beginning. By July 6th, it's already beginning to look like the image on the right-hand side. Each of those are individual seeds that have this sort of wings on it. They're distributed by, those seeds are distributed by the wind and by rainwater. Okay. So a lot of folks who put dried arrangements together, like this curly dock. Now, fleabanes, this is a really good example of the aster family. Notice especially in the right-hand image, notice the beautiful yellow disc flowers and the white or pinkish ray flowers. So those are all individual flowers here. Okay. Notice, again, a lot of times when you're doing the identification of these plants, they will talk about hairy stems. If you look at the image in the middle. So some of these fleabanes, this annual or daisy fleabane, some of the fleabanes will have hairy stems and some won't. And that can be a deciding factor in what you're seeing. This is a beautiful plant. This is a plant of weedy fields, forest edges, and it could be white, as in the image that you see in the upper left-hand corner, or it can have a pinkish or a bluish tinge, as you see in the right-hand image. And again, notice the genus name here, okay? Achillea, okay? It's named for Achilles, who is said to have used this plant, or plants in this genus, to heal the wounds of his soldiers at the siege of Troy. As I say, some of these things you can completely lose yourself just chasing the scientific names and understanding where are these coming from. And I find it, again, very interesting. Now, this I think is I'm not a physician or a nurse or anything, so I don't see many kidneys, but this is kidney-leaved violet. So a lot of folks very often assume that a violet, if the name violet, you would think that they have to be blue, but a lot of violets are in fact white. And this is one of them that I photographed on the forest floor. Actually, this was in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. This is the Connecticut Lakes, the source of the Connecticut River that comes down as a border between Vermont and New Hampshire and so forth, and empties out in Connecticut. But a beautiful blossom. Okay. So this is old field toad flax. Okay. These blossoms are only about half an inch across. But if you look at the image, in the middle image, notice there are three fully open blossoms. If you look at the one that's sort of at 9 o'clock, notice the nectar tube that crosses the stem. So it goes from about 9 o'clock, and that nectar tube is pointing at about, say, 5 o'clock. Okay. One of the reasons for that nectar tube is the plant is being selective as to which insects can pollinate it and get the nectar. And that's why that nectar tube is designed to prevent insects from getting the nectar and encouraging the ones that can get to that nectar to pollinate them. And toad flax, again, the myth that comes with these wildflowers is that one of the origin is that William Coles, that he was 1626 to 1662, said that he had seen toads that were sheltering themselves among the branches of it. Okay, maybe he did, but in any case, that's where that name is coming from. Again, each of these blossoms is just exquisite, and they're tiny, only about half an inch. Okay. Then if you get into wetland areas, this is tufted yellow loosestrife. A lot of people think of purple loosestrife, but there are a whole series of yellow hyphen loosestrifes, and this is one of them. Okay. And again, notice this. The genus name is coming from a Macedonian king. Okay. He was a successor to Alexander the Great, who was said to have used this loosestrife, this plant, in order to calm his oxen. This is a wetland plant. Notice those beautiful blossoms. So many different, member of the primrose family, by the way. Okay. And you saw this briefly before. This is wild calla. And it has, if you look at the image on the right-hand side, you have the spathe and the spadix, okay, just like we saw when we were looking at the jack in the pulpit. So this is a plant that grows in acidic bogs. Okay, photographed this one in Andover, Massachusetts. There's a beautiful quaking bog up there. Okay, you know, most people dread poison ivy, because I know that some people can react very badly or can be very, very ill. But this is the blossoms of the poison ivy that you see on the left-hand side. And then the seed pods that you see on the right-hand side. Very toxic to some people. You want to avoid it. But for a lot of wildlife, poison ivy formed a really important role by the seeds, because so many small mammals and birds will eat these seeds that are on the poison ivy. And of course, what the poison ivy is making these seeds in such a way that an animal will eat it or carry it away and then transport its seeds around. This is field bindweed, a non-native plant to our area, and this is one that again doesn't put any energy into making a stalk to stand upright, like say a sunflower will stand upright. No, it puts its energy in growing fast, and it doesn't matter. It just grows over all the other vegetation. So one strategy is you grow up by yourself above the other vegetation to get light. In this case, a different strategy is, no, I'm going to just not make a really strong stem. I'm going to just grow over everything else. That way I can get to the sunlight that's around me. So beautiful blossoms though. Notice some of them are tinged with, as in the bottom right-hand corner, with a little bit of pink. Yeah. This is little rattle. Okay, this is a plant of open fields. Okay. And it gets its name because if you look at the seed pods at the bottom, after the blossoms are gone by and the seeds are fertilized, if you take this plant and shake it, you can hear the seeds rattling around inside those greenish pods that you see. You can see in both images here. So open fields. It's just one of these things that this is another one of those plants that could be so easily overlooked. But these will be in fields for quite a long time still. Now, water plants, this is fragrant water lily. It's native to North America. The blossoms can be 2 inches, but as much as 8 inches across. Notice the variety in here. The image in the bottom right-hand corner, I photographed just about this time of year. Notice a beautiful pinkish color. It's a perennial, freshwater marshes is where it grows. Just one of these nice plants. Now this is pyrola, or another name for this is shinleaf. Okay. This is one of those plants that had medicinal or purported medicinal plants, the pyrolas. And that's where you get the idea of shin leaf, the shins. So this was a product that if you had an ailment of the legs or the shins or something like that, that they would go and pick the leaves and they would wrap the leaves around the ailing part. And that was purported to have given relief for that ailment. And that's where shin leaf, the name shin leaf, comes from. Beautiful blossom. This is one of those plants that often I would have to go back a couple weeks in a row to the same plant, waiting for the blossoms to open so I could get an image of the blossoms. Because these shin leaves and petiole and things of that nature tend to open very, very slowly. In the introduction, I talked about whorls. Okay, this is a really good example of this. This is whorled yellow loosestrife. Notice the yellow hyphen loosestrife group. Notice all the blossoms are coming from the axils. The leaves are in whorls, and the blossoms are coming out of the axils in whorls. If you notice the blossom in the upper right-hand corner, it is really, truly beautiful. I mean, the yellow with the reddish around the bottom, it's just really beautiful. And the bottom image in September, again, I go back to a lot of these plants, and I want to get an image of their seed capsule, and that's what you see in the bottom right-hand corner. Okay. Now, I think for a lot of people are familiar with this plant. This is partridge berry. The blossoms are about a half an inch across. They're maybe 3/4 inch long, but half an inch across the top. If you look at the image right in the middle, at the lower middle, it's just extraordinarily beautiful. Yeah. And the berries, partridge berry, well, because partridges, grouse, things like this would eat the berries. And this is one of the ones that in the early springtime and through the wintertime, if you walk out in the woods, you'll very often see some of these berries still from the prior summer and fall. It's a real beauty. If you look at some of the, it's hard to, in my image, in the upper right-hand corner is blocked, but they will have 2 dimples. And if you see the flower that's in the middle, the 2 flowers, both of those need to be pollinated for the seed to germinate. And when you see the berry, it has 2 dimples where those blossoms were. Okay. This is the idea of how plants survive and flourish is just a wonderful story. This is the images I took in Lubec, Maine, but if you have a quaking bog, there's one in Lincoln, Massachusetts, and other places. You can go to see these. They need very acidic soil. So there's not much nutrients in the environment around where these plants are living. So what they do is a pitcher plant gets its name because they actually hold water inside. If you look at the image on the left-hand side, and if you look up closer, notice on the left-hand image, you see the water inside the pitcher. And if you look at the right-hand image, notice there's a fly in there. Looks like a water strider inside there. And if you look at the lip of the pitcher plant, notice all the hairs are pointing down. Okay, so any plant that is attracted to the nectar sweet water that's in the pitcher of the pitcher plant, they fly in there, and it's such an angle that it's very difficult for them to fly out. And those little hairs cause them not to be able to walk out. So eventually the insect falls back into the water, dies, and the plant then absorbs the nutrients that are in that insect to supplement the very acidic and nutrient poor area in which it's living. And I just want to go back one slide to see how beautiful those blossoms are. When you see them, the blossoms can be up to 3 inches across. They're usually nodding, facing down, but in this case, I found this one that I was able to photograph the flower itself. This is a non-native plant, but if you're walking along the forestry road or very often in disturbed areas, this is Dentfort pink, and it gets the name Depth because that's a village in England where apparently there are lots of them. And if you look at first of all, the beautiful blossom in the middle, notice that on the left-hand image, there are many, many blossoms coming from the tip of the flower, okay? Maiden pink looks similar to this, but only has one blossom per stem, where you see multiple ones in this case. And if you go down to the bottom right-hand image, notice how many seeds they are, these tiny, tiny seeds that can be transported by water or by wind. This is really something. And they're nyctinastic, meaning the blossoms typically will close up in the late afternoon. This is a beautiful plant. I was up in the Connecticut, northernmost New Hampshire just last week, and these plants were still in blossom around here. If you see them, the blossoms have gone by. But again, if you go up to northern New England, you could still see them. But in the right-hand image, you can see the berry. This is a yellow blue bead lily, or just simply blue bead lily. And this is one interest. Now, notice the genus name again, Clintonia. Okay, well, this was named after D. Witt Clinton, who invented the steamboat, but he was also the governor of New York, which is interesting where these names come from. Now, this is sort of a noxious thing. Again, another plant that decided I'm not going to put any energy in growing tall. I'm just going to grow over everything else. This is bittersweet nightshade. Okay, and it's a non-native plant, but you'll see it a lot. Remember, the nightshade family is native to Eurasia, and it reproduces via seeds in the berries that you see at the bottom right-hand corner, or by rhizomes. And some of these plants can grow 12 to 14 feet long, just, again, growing over other plants. I know it's a noxious plant, but you look at the blossoms and you look at the fruit, and that does make a really nice image. Yeah. Now, this is a group, the knapweeds are going to become very, very common as we go, again, through the end of this year. This happens to be black knapweed. It's not native, okay? And it was named after the genus name, after the centaur Chiron, who in Greek mythology discovered the medicinal uses of this plant. So a lot of these plants that we don't think about very much as having any medicinal purposes were vitally important to people because it was part of the set of the pharmacy that they had at that time. These are really beautiful, beautiful plants that are going to becoming really, really common. Notice on the left-hand image, I photographed that on June 18th, but the right-hand image all the way until September. So we'll have plenty of those to see. Nice. Black-eyed Susan. I think most children know black-eyed Susans. It's just one of those common plants that everybody loves. Another name for it is black-eyed coneflower. And this is common mullein, not native, but notice the blossoms. Each of those blossoms usually lasts only one day. So you have the stalk of many, many blossoms on it, and they usually each blossoms will open for a day and then fade, and they're done. So these stalks that you see here can be 4 or 5 feet tall. Beautiful plant to see. Yeah. And I guess one of my favorite plants is this milkweed, because it's so beneficial to so many insects, whether there be the milkweed beetles, those sort of black and red beetles that you see. But I mean, I think most of us are aware of the fact that this is a really important host plant for the monarch butterfly. Really, really beautiful. It's a member of the dog bane family. So it's really nice. It's I love the idea, the image in the middle, October 11th. So again, this is a plant that you'll be seeing in blossom for quite a long time. And then when it goes to seed, and this is a plant that is primarily seed distributed by the wind. So each of those little seeds are attached to a little parachute. And when the wind blows, they're carried away. This is another one of those plants. The genus name is named for another king, the king of healing in Greek mythology. So again, so many of these plants had perceived in very important medicinal benefits. Here's another one of these yellow loosestripes. I think I've already shown you several. This is another name for this, is swamp candle. I've heard many people refer to it that way, as swamp candle. And this is one that has another one of these wetland plants. The blossoms are only about 3/4 inch across. Wetland plant. Now, St. John's wort, okay? This is one of the native ones that we have here. And there are many of them. And it gets its name from the fact that in Europe, this blossom, the European species of the St. John's wort, blossomed around St. John's Day, which was June 24th in Europe. So that's where it gets its name, where we get the name for this plant, St. John's wort. Here's another shin leaf. This is another one of the pyrolas. Okay, that we see. A different, but just look at the extraordinary blossoms that you see on the right-hand side. And in the bottom image, you can see that there's another ant that's working away here. Again, it was a medicinal plant. Whether it actually did any good or not, who knows? But so much of the medicine has to, 75, 80% of the time you're not feeling well, you get better anyway, no matter what happens. So as long as somebody thought that somebody was aiding them with some kind of medicinal plant, they'd already about, most often would feel better anyway. But shin leaf, I think this is really a beautiful plant. I've only seen this at a couple places. This is Venus's looking glass. Okay. Oh, and just something origin, again, some of the European species, where does it get the name looking glass? Some of the European species of this, in this genus, they have large seeds with a shiny mirror-like surface. So that's where that name comes from. Now, this is one of these plants that is a real problem in our freshwater wetlands, and even sometimes in brackish wetlands. This is purple loosestripe, not native to here. So this is one that has been taking over so many of, displacing so many of our plants, like cattails and things of that nature. It's interesting to know, notice all these blossoms, but one plant of this, it's estimated it can produce up to 2 million seeds in a year. It's a perennial. And so it's beautiful, but not good. Another wetland plant. This is pickerelweed. Again, so right about this time, I photographed these things on June 24th. That happened to be in West Newbury, but there are a lot of places, if you have wetlands, you really should go looking for these. It's a beautiful plant. Like a lot. Yeah. And here's another milkweed. This is a plant that can grow in very wet areas, but can also grow where it's relatively drier. But this is one of those traditional, a traditional medicinal use of this plant was you would eat it or take a broth made from it, and that would purge you of parasitic worms. Okay, if you have worms and you can get rid of them, I guess you should really have some milkweed. The butterflies, lots of different butterflies will come and nectar on these plants to get the nectar and the pollen for these plants. This is Pipsissewa. This is the one plant that I remember. There's a small stand of these in Groveland, Massachusetts. There are other places, but that's where I found them, along this old country road. And I went back to this small group of plants for 4 weeks in a row, waiting to try to see the blossoms open. They were very, very slow. But this is a plant, as I saw it in April. This is an evergreen wildflower. So you can go in the wintertime. I have images of this plant covered in snow. This is Pipsissewa. And then you see the blossoms in the upper portion. That was on June 14th. And it wasn't until June 26th that I got there to see them open. So I've been going all that time just to see this plant come and blossom. And notice the image on the right-hand side. These are just extraordinary. And the local Abenaki people gave this name for the flower of the woods. So that's where that name comes from. Then chicory, a non-native plant here, but this is one that was used by a lot of people, especially those that economically difficult time in place of coffee. Okay, so chicory, it's so notice the beautiful fly that's on the blossom on the upper right hand side. So these will come in various different colors. The chicory will be both almost pure white to a very distinct, beautiful blue. So this is something of the roadsides, a coffee substitute, as I say, and it could be fodder for livestock. But one of those really beautiful plants. There's so many. This is soapwort. Okay, now flower names that end in W-O-R-T, wort probably in Old English, but means that this plant was recognized for its either medicinal purposes or culinary purpose. So if you see W-O-R-T at the end of the word, that is a good clue. It's also known as bouncing bat. And it gets its name soapwort because the plant produces some saponin, S-A-P-O-N-I-N, that has, when you crush it and put it in water, it sort of acts like soap. So this was one of those things that, again, medicinal purposes for cleaning or things of that nature. So they are June 27th, so you go out, they're in blossom right now. And this is, by the way, this is the first time I had seen them in blossom. Doesn't mean they weren't blossoming before that, but when I saw them for the first time. This is foxglove beard tongue. So this is a semi-parasitic plant. It's a member of the plantain family, which seems sort of strange anyway. So they have both male and female blossoms on the same plant. So very often where you'll see these, they are semi-parasitic on oak trees. Here's another. Yes, please.
There was a comment, I think, back a couple
Yes.
on the chicory. Somebody said that looks like I don't know, maybe mispronounce it, but looks like a green agapostem on the chicory. Oh, the bug maybe.
Oh, the bug. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that one. That could well be.
And I sorry, I'm getting lost in the details, but somebody else just asked where in Lincoln is the quaking bog? But I don't know if that was relevant to one of the ones that you just said. I forgot it.
Okay, Matt, I'm having difficulty hearing you, but that's
Oh, can you hear me now?
yes, I can. Fine.
Okay, so I got a little lost in the details, so I apologize. But somebody asked if where in Lincoln is the quaking bog? I'm not sure if that was relevant to the one of the recent ones or if it was back. But the quaking bog in Lincoln.
Okay, I still didn't get the question. I'm sorry.
Where in Lincoln is the quaking bog?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Let me think. The quaking bog is it? Well, let me think about it. I'll remember by the time I get to the end.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Another St. John's wort. This happened. This is a non-native one that was introduced. Okay. And this is a plant was used to ward off evil spirits. Well, if it's a St. John's wort related to some saint, well, you could understand how people would think that they would have some kind of ability to ward off evil spirits and things of that nature. Now, this is another toad flax. This again is non-native. Just think of how many, what is it? Something like 46%, as I remember, of the wildflowers that we have in the United States, North America now, are non-native. Okay. Because you can imagine how many plants and seed when the earliest colonists even were coming over with their ships and they had livestock, they had to bring hay and fodder for their animals and everything like that. You could see how much could possibly come over. This is again, notice the nectar tube. You can see it in the image in the upper right hand corner and the other ones. Okay. And this is one I think as kids, maybe you towards the end of the September, towards September and October, you'd go and notice the seed. Well, first of all, the blossoms with the nectar tube that you could see, especially in the image in the bottom center. But then the seed pods in the image in the center on top, when those start to get really turn brown, there's still a little bit green to it, but if you touch the end of them, there's a spring-like mechanism inside that shoots the seed out. And that's one way of seed distribution that is not relatively common, and but you see it in other plants too, where the like wild geraniums have a similar situation. It's a spring, it's a natural part of the seed pod, but as it dries, it then acts like a spring and throws the seed out. A really beautiful plant here that is really quite variable. This is, a lot of folks know this as Queen Anne's lace, and that's what I always knew it as. But in the guides, they're using the term wild carrot more. But it's extraordinarily beautiful. Everything from notice the image near the top. All the other flowers in that umbro are white, but right in the middle is this beautiful purple one. Purple. Notice in the image in the bottom, the same situation. But here in case, some of the outer blossoms are this pinkish purple. And then the lower right-hand corner, all white. And the seed pods, seed heads that you see at the upper right-hand corner, notice that each of the seeds, you can see it under just above October 27th, they have these little spines. So if you walk through them, they attach to your clothing. Well, when this plant evolved, there was no clothing, but you had animals. You had deer and things like that would be walking in there, and they would pick up these seeds on their fur, and they would just transport these seeds to other places. But this is one of those plants again that is really worthwhile to take a look, see if you can find one that has the white with that really purple center. The next one, this is one that's July 4th. We're coming up before too long. The image on the left-hand side I took on July 4th. This was in Newbury, and this beautiful wood lily. the blossoms are up to 3 inches across. They're really beautiful. You can see the anthers, the male portion of the blossoms that are sticking up there. And this is, I took this in Newbury, Massachusetts. It's a wildlife management area, Martin Burn Wildlife Management Area. And they just are going out in the fields there. Now, this is something you want to be very careful of. Okay. This is bad. This is water hemlock. It's in an umbral, like a lot of things are in umbrals, but this can be even worse than poison ivy for a lot of people. So before you go picking any wild hemlock or things that look like you really should be very, very careful to understand what is it that I'm picking, because you don't want to get a severe rash. One of the clues too, at least to me, if you look at the stems, there's quite a bit of purple at the axils and along parts of the stem, which may be helpful. It's one of our most toxic. It's deadly for wildlife, livestock that might get into it. Meadow sweet. This is coming. Beautiful. Steeple-like bush with the notice the center image with a beetle working on it to actually getting pollen and nectar, pollinating it. This is white avens, a tiny little blossom. It's only about ½ inch across. This is a plant that I see mainly in open forested areas. Blossom, but certainly worth seeing. And now this is wintergreen, and this is a plant that I photographed in the summer, and notice the beautiful dangling down blossoms. And by October, then you start seeing this is an evergreen wildflower. So if you go out in the wintertime, you will see the leaves still green, is like that, with those beautiful red berries that you see there. A lot of folks may know this is checkerberry. That's another name. That's more a name more used in Europe, but either wintergreen. And if you were to crumple up the leaf and smell it, it smells like wintergreen. I try not to do that, but you can. And then we start getting into some of the orchids. Again, the orchids are the largest family of flowering plants. And this is white fringed orchid. You can see this was growing in a quaking bog in Andover, Massachusetts. And this is I went up this is Ponema Bog in Amherst, New Hampshire. This is one of those, another extraordinarily beautiful orchid. It doesn't say orchid, its name is grass pink, as you can see. But these, again, they only grow in these really acid conditions. Yeah. Sundew. Now I'm still up in Ponema Bog, and this is sundew. Notice in the upper left-hand image, these looks like paddles, like ping pong paddles or something, with all the hairs around it. This is another plant that needs to supplement its diet by capturing insects. So what an insect, if it lands on one of those paddle-like shape, it will close up around the insect, and then the insect dies, and the plant then absorbs the nutrients that it's getting out of the insect. So that's very often in these quaking bogs, you'll see two different types of sundews, and this is the round leaf. Notice the leaves are practically round, and living right next to it is this one in the same bog. This is a spatulate leaf. The blossoms are just absolutely tiny. The blossom that you see in the upper right-hand corner is 1/4 inch across. So that you can see now that the two different types of sundews. Only in really very, very acidic conditions. Full thistle, as we're going into now July 7th into August, now the thistles really come into blossom. And these are, again, for farmers, this is not a good thing. It's a member of the aster family. It's native to Europe. And the seeds are wind dispersed like milkweed. but talk about protected blossoms. Okay. And this is spotted wintergreen. Okay. Now, this one I would have thought would have been really nicely named if they said striped wintergreen, but it's not. It's spotted wintergreen. And you can see these, it's an evergreen wildflowers. So that's an image that I took in the very early spring, in the middle. And then you can see just extraordinary blossoms. Bee balm Oswego tea is another name for this plant. And it gets its name Oswego tea from the Indian Nation in New York, that they used to use this as a beverage. Bee balm, another name for it. I think most people know it by bee balm. It really attracts hummingbirds, really important for hummingbirds. This is a really good time to look for this plant. Showy tick trefoil. These to me have orchid-like blossoms to me. Notice the seed pods in the bottom right-hand corner. This is each. You notice there are like 4 or 5 different seeds attached in a row, but each of those can break off separately, and they have little hairs on them. So again, if you walk through them with your clothing, or a wild animal walks through, they will pick those up and then distribute those. So the genus name comes from the Greek desmos, which means a band or a chain, as you can see in the seed pods on the right. Here's a Canada lily. So this is the time for the lilies to get out and see if you can find them in weedy fields or along forest edges. Member of the lily family. The blossoms are nodding. But then I went back, and October 1st, I went to get a seed pod and look at the seeds that were formed within the seed pods. So the blossoms face down until the seeds have been pollinated, the flowers have been pollinated, the seeds start to form, and then it goes and rises up so it can be more easily, seeds can be more easily distributed by the wind. This is just a roadside plant, agrimony, okay? A member of the rose family. Okay. False parsley, fool's parsley. It's a poisonous plant. So you need to be careful about some of these things that are in umbels. So this is horse nettle. They're coming to blossom, coming on still. This is another plant. Well, in this case, it grows upright, and it has little spines on it, so you don't want to walk right through it. But you see the blossoms and the forming fruit, and then by October 24th, it's the seeds are formed. And germander, a member of the mint family, and the native people used to make teas out of the leaves. It looks like so much like a mint leaves. But I hope that you won't dismiss the incredible flower stalk, but to look at each of the blossoms. They are really orchid-like. They're just so beautiful. So this is the genus family for this thing. It's named for a Trojan king in Greece because in mythology he used this plant as a medicine. So these plants have such a long tradition of traditional medication. And I'm going to start finishing up here pretty close. This is large cranberry, and there are cranberry bogs, certainly, commercial ones on southeastern Massachusetts and out on Cape Cod. But they also grow in wild bogs. For example, I'm very familiar with the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge on Plum Island, and there are bogs on the island. And this is where I photographed these large cranberry. You can get, by a lottery, you can get a permit late in the fall to actually go and pick cranberries on these bogs. And if you have any interest in that at all, you would contact the folks at the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge in the refuge headquarters in Newburyport. Anyway, this is a beautiful thing. Those cranberries are beautiful, and Look at that, just incredible blossom with the petals that are reflecting, they're facing backwards. Yeah. I think this is a very common plant for folks in the fall. This is the July 14th and on tansy. They make such beautiful dried displays. Notice the grasshopper on the right-hand image. Wherever I could, I'd like to get an image of an insect on the plants. Common evening primrose, we saw this before, but it literally produces thousands of seeds, each one of these. Common evening primrose. So if you see one of these, the image of the seed stalk in the middle of the image, and you shake it, there are just hundreds of seeds come out. Indian pipes. Okay, this is my last slide here. This is another one of these. It has no chlorophyll at all. It absorbs dead material, think of sort of like a fungus, and decaying leaf matter. And it has a symbiotic relationship with a mycorrhizal fungus, which so many plants do. That's a topic for another time. But in order to, that has this relationship with the fungus, that the fungus helps the plant attach to a host plant or to decaying vegetation in order to transport nutrients into the plant. So this is the blossom. Notice the blossoms, when they're in blossom, they're nodding, but once they're fertilized, they go upright, as you can see in the image, in order for seed dispersals, mainly by wind. Well, those are the ones that I wanted to cover. I mean, there's so many more that we could go on for a much longer time, but I'm hoping we've talked about some of the different strategies. You grow up straight, or do you just grow over everybody else? You have relationships with other organisms. I hope that this will really encourage you to look carefully at the blossoms and enjoy how beautiful they are. And we'll be back on August 8th to talk about some of the fall wildflowers. And that's an extraordinary time of goldenrods and Joe Pye weeds and just some of these just exquisite wildflowers. That's it for now for me, Matt.
Thank you so much, Bill. Just a minor correction that I think you'll be back on July 25th for that. For part
I'm
3.
sorry.
And August 8th will be talk on Connecticut Lake, but just for clarification. But
a question was about the quaking bog.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since, but in Lincoln there's Mount Misery. Okay,
Missouri.
and I know it's near there, but I'm struggling to give you. I think if you looked up Quaking Bog Lincoln or Quaking Bog Concord, I think you probably could find it.
Great. Another comment is Queen Anne's lace is botanically the same plant as our domestic carrot. Not all Queen Anne's lace flowers have the red centered blossom also.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, in my images, I showed some that were just all white, but every once in a while you look through them and you'll get either a pink or a purple, tiny little blossom on the inside.
Yeah. Someone asked, is there an app that's available to help identify flowers?
Yes, there is. It's called, I'll pull it up on my phone right now. I believe it's called Seek. And it's Seek. It's SEEK. It's quite effective. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll just say aster. Okay, I mean there are thousands of asters. I mean, so it will get you to the right church, not to necessarily to the right pew. Okay, but in some cases, the really common plant, it can be very, very effective in doing that. I would caution people about using those apps too much, because part of the thing is if you have a field guide and you work through the identification process in the field guide, it really helps you notice the plant parts and what are the important plant parts. And I think at least I remember things better that way. But I don't want to discourage people from using it. I just want to caution folks that You might not get as much out of it as if you went through the identification key. And sometimes seek, although it's very effective, will only get you part way.
I just to add my own experience, limited, but there's Google Lens will also like show you similar plants, and it's not always accurate, but it has identified at least the names if I just wanted to know that, and then I could look up more information after. But just wanted to add that. Let's see.
But you can use something like Seek or something to get you started,
Yeah,
but then I think it's really worthwhile going to, again, the Peterson field guides have hand-drawn illustrations, and they're incredible.
yeah,
Okay, even they're really dated, but so what? The plans haven't changed that much. Well, the element guide are photographs, and photographs can be very effective sometimes. But again, if you go to a book sale, library sale, and you can see some old Peterson field guides, grab them, okay? Because they are really very, very effective.
right. Another question is, do you have some comments on how you take such beautiful photos?
Well, I have a camera that works well. And for every photograph I get that is usable, I have 10 or 12 that aren't. Okay. I mean, it takes a lot of patience, I have to admit. I mean, and I'm always upgrading my images. I don't know, I have this memory of which ones aren't particularly good. And so I'll try to upgrade them. So I'm upgrading my PowerPoints all the time with new images. But I mean, certainly an effective camera is a really good starting point, and you have to be able to focus really quite close. So my camera it's a Nikon, a P1000, so it's from 24 to 3000. Okay, so I can use it if I get down on my belly, like I did in this image on the July 15th of the Indian pipe. I can get within 2 or 3 inches of it. Or I could take photographs of birds that are half a mile away. So it works really well. But it's one of these things that really takes patience. You have to watch the light, because if there's too much light, it washes everything out. You can do photo compensation. I understand you can do all those things, but a lot of cases I'll make my own shadow in order to try to even out the lighting. So there are a lot of tricks that you can do but persistence is one of them.
Hmm, interesting. Does I forget if you mentioned this in the beginning with the list of resources or references that you've had. Um, is there a book in particular that talks about the origins of a lot of the names? Or does the Peterson guide cover that? Or...
Oh, I haven't found any flower guide that talks about the origin, but if I could just get back out of this and go way to the back here, the beginning, and talk about the references here. Let me see, slideshow. Okay, again, these are the guides that I use. Okay, first of all, the Peterson guides we've already talked about. They don't talk about anything about the origin of scientific names or anything. The next one, Flori novae anglii, that's this thick, and it's not a field guide. There are illustrations, but mainly of plant parts and things like that. The Newcomb's Wildlife Guide from I have an edition 1977. I still use it. It's really very, very effective. It's good. Northwoods Wildflowers, simply because I do quite a bit of time in the Northwoods. I like that. And the Element. Then if you go to the bottom, it says translation of the scientific names. That Dave's Garden, go online, Dave's Garden, and that's davesgarden.com/guide/botanary/ and it will get you to a number of different things, but one of which is the scientific names. And I just find it so interesting that so much of this, the names, of course, they're in Latin or have been Latinized, are coming out of the Greek. And so a lot of these, that's where a lot of these names are coming from, the historical record or whatever from Greece and Rome. And that's really worth it, just to chase down a few names.
Well, Thank you so much, Bill, for all this information and your abundance of knowledge. And oh, there was just one other comment somebody just said. Great book is Field Guide to Medicinal Wild and Edible Plants by Bradford and Shears. They said it's the best they found with awesome illustrations and writing. And that they think he hails from Boston. And then
Yes, that could certainly include that. There's one thing that I didn't have a chance to talk to much about here is but the doctrine of signatures, and that's where in the traditional thinking is that God had made for us everything we could possibly want in this world, and that God had given us signs, signals, whatever you want to, in the plants that would describe what it was used for, what it was to be used for. That was the doctrine of signatures. So in this traditional medicine, if you saw a plant that was a shape, a leaf or something that was the shape of a kidney, according to the doctrine of signatures, you could assume that that was a sign that God had given you that that plant was used to cure kidney ailments. So that the doctrine of signatures, it's and there are many. Another one is if you're familiar with the plant Boneset. Boneset, you have a stem and the leaves on either side are joined together. And there are two explanations. One is Boneset was because the leaves are fused together on the opposite sides of the stem, that was meant that was to, if you have a broken bone, to heal that bone, you would wrap the broken leg or arm in the Boneset and that would help it heal because God gave you the hint, the idea that that's what's worth. I think the more reasonable one is that dengue fever, another name for that is bone break fever. And so I think it's more widely accepted that Boneset, because of the leaves being fused, was a sign from God that was a medicinal plant for curing dengue fever, which was called bone break fever. Anyway, so it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah,
And again, as I said before, if you have a plant like that has a medicinal purpose, again, most of the time, if you were sick and somebody chanted over you or gave you medications or something, you eventually would feel better. So
yeah,
it worked.
very interesting. Well, you got a lot of thank yous and comments about your photos being beautiful and the comments about wealth of knowledge. So thank you very much, Bill. Echo that as well. And
Well, folks, good evening. And Matt, it's always a real pleasure to work with you.
absolutely. Pleasure to work with you. Thank you everyone for coming. Good night.
Good night.